Hey everybody, continuing on with my pieces on branch lines. This segment will be on the Eastside branch. The Eastside branch was built by Southern Pacific Railroad, and it ran from Fresno to Famoso, and it ran east out of Fresno to the foothills on the east side of the San Joaquin Valley to pick up all the agricultural business, and terminated at Famoso, just north of Bakersfield. In 1887, the Stockton and Tulare Railroad was incorporated to build this branch line. Before the construction started, Southern Pacific took over ownership of it. That's the way things were back then. It was never intended to be any other way, but the way the laws were written back then, an owning company could not start construction on a branch line that took off of their main line without essentially starting a different business to do that. Strange, I don't know. It was before the Sherman Antitrust Act, so I don't know why they did that stuff, but they did. That's just the way it was. But anyway, Southern Pacific started the line in 1887, and they completed it to Porterville in July of 1888. And an interesting note about Porterville is that between Fresno and Famoso, or Bakersfield, Porterville was the only town that already existed. All the other towns, Exeter, Lindsay, all the ones that we'll see in this piece, were all either laid out by the railroad or by developers after the railroad arrived. But anyway, they completed it from Porterville to Famoso in 1890, and it was a very successful branch line. It was actually considered a B main, and it was signaled. They put automatic block signals out here, and if a derailment or some other sort of problem were to affect the main line between Bakersfield and Fresno, they could actually run through trains up this line. And that did happen a few times. I'm told it didn't happen very often. The signal system up here, it was automatic block, and it was abandoned in 1986 by the Southern Pacific Railroad, and business was real bad on this line for the SP, and in 1991 San Joaquin Valley Railroad took over operation of this line, and they made it a very successful line. But anyway, I'm going to do this backwards, milepost wise. This line technically begins in Fresno at about milepost 203, and technically ends here at Famoso. And I don't know, since I live in Bakersfield, I was just going to start it heading up instead of heading down. But it doesn't matter. It all comes out in a wash. So let's go check out the East Side branch and see what we can see. This is where the switch for the East Side branch comes off the siding at Famoso. See, they got a dual stack container parked in here. This is a spring switch, and for those of you who saw my piece on hand throw switches, this is another type of hand throw switch. Didn't have any of them out in the desert where I shot those other ones, but this is a spring switch. It's normally lined for movement down the siding, and when a train comes out of the branch line, they don't have to get out and throw the switch. They just go through it. The flanges of the train wheels push the switch over, and that hydraulic rim right there keeps the switch in place until the train has moved over it. After the last wheel goes by, in about 10 seconds, that will actually slam shut. This particular switch is out of service. They haven't used it in a very long time. I don't even remember the last time it was used, but it's been many years. It doesn't go very far. This branch is pulled up in the middle, you might say. Just beyond Famoso, up here a few miles. We'll stop and check that out. But it ends up there. The rails are pulled up to a place called Strathmore, just north of Porterville. You can see how it hasn't been used. The weeds are growing over the tracks where the come out signal is, and also in that switch segment I did, talked about the different types of protection of electric locks. This one has a come out signal rather than an electric lock, and I will link those switch videos in the description below. Come out signal works just a little differently. A train comes up, and when the train is given permission to occupy the siding by the dispatcher, that signal will go to yellow. All right, the only reason I really stopped here was this is where one of the automatic block signals used to stand. There's its foundation. Someone has come up and knocked the old style B case over, but this was at one time the last signal before you got to Famoso. And when I was working for American Signal Technologies, who was contracted to the San Joaquin Valley Railroad, I did that for about a year back in around 1995. I was a gang foreman for Southern Pacific, took some work on the side with them to help them get some things in shape. This signal was actually still here at the time, and I stole the number plate off of it, and that is hanging in my dad's garage. I believe this thing here was, they made fertilizer here, and I think they still do. It's just not serviced by the rails anymore. You can see the switch that is looking north towards the Fresno end of the line. And you can see the old pole line there that used to run the signals that were here. We have moved up to the end of the line. This is as far north as the rails come from Famoso. They are pulled up from here, as I said, to a place called Strathmore, which is about 35, 40 miles from here. This is milepost 384. There's a milepost sign right there. You can't see it anymore, but this was the last business that this part of the branch served. It was in operation until about 5 years ago, I guess. Once that business ceased operations, they do not use this end of the branch anymore. As you saw down at the switch where it ties in, I talked about, you saw the weeds, I talked about how they don't use it anymore. I'm sure this will be pulled up at some point, and that switch abandoned on the siding at Famoso. I don't know what this place did. If anyone watching this ever worked here, or any of you train guys ever served this, leave it in the comments below. I'd be interested in knowing what this place did. And as I said in a couple of spots early up here between Strathmore and Famoso, there are still a few things that are interesting, if not fascinating, and I love bridges, and this is one of those bridges. This one is just south of Rich Grove, and doesn't go over a named river or creek of any kind, just drainage, but it's an old concrete deck bridge. I don't know when they upgraded this one from a wooden trestle. As you can see, the deck has been stripped of its ties and ballast and rails. Jennifer decided she'd get out of the truck. It's pretty chilly today, windy and cool. We're in Rich Grove, towards the south end of town. The Rich Grove swap meet there. And that right there is the roadbed for the Eastside branch. And the reason I wanted to stop here is, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, that I'd heard that this referred to by different names over the years, and one of those was the Rich Grove branch. But this, where we're standing right now, is actually the roadbed for what was actually the Rich Grove branch. And it followed that curve along that fence, about where that, to the right of where the road is there. And it went out 4 miles and served the grape industry out there. This is a lot of, this about as far as you can see from here over towards Delano is all grapes. And at one time, there were 11 shippers, major shippers, in Rich Grove. There was a Y, there was a scale, and I'm talking about the railroad scales. And for you who don't know, you've heard me talk about Ys before. A Y is just that, it's a piece of rail that is just shaped like a Y, and they used it to turn steam engines around. They used them to turn diesel sometimes too, but that wasn't necessary. So that is where the Rich Grove branch split off from the Eastside branch. It went out, like I said, 4 miles to a place called Jovista, or Jovista. I don't know how it's pronounced. Jovista, Jovista, I guess. I don't know. But according to the research material that I have, this was still in operation as late as 2005, and was up for abandonment in 2008. And obviously they won that at some point, because none of it's here anymore. We're standing in the roadbed here. I just thought it was interesting. This really doesn't have anything to do with the railroad. I could find no record or any information about the railroad having anything to do with shipping materials to build this, but they possibly did. I don't know when this was built, but it's one of the older buildings. I have no idea when it was built, but the railroad probably did have a little. I know that right up there, that building that you can see up there, that did have a side track that went into it, and it looks like there used to be another building up there that was agricultural shipping. But anyway, I love these old buildings. I think they really look cool. Southern California Edison and PG&E both used really cool architecture back in the day. Okay, looking back up towards Ducor, and this old abandoned elevator here, been sitting here for a really long time. I did a still photo history of this branch line quite a few years ago. If you're interested in that, you can go to my Facebook, but it's just Mark McGowan. If you want to go look at that, pull up the albums, the photo albums in that, and pretty interesting. But anyway, there was actually a small concern here that you can see where the trucks would come in right there. A little scale there, a grate where they could unload if they had the bottom dumps, put them into the silos. They could dump that out into railroad cars. They only loaded into rail cars here. They didn't load out. But not much here to explore. And I'm not brave enough to climb up the top of that thing there. I don't suppose anyone would care if I did, other than me. Okay, we are just south of Ducor, and the reason I wanted to shoot this one from below rather than up on the roadbed, you can see the fill there, is because of this magnificent trestle. I love wooden trestles. You don't see them much anymore. Most of them have been upgraded to steel over the years, but this was a branch line, so it didn't get that kind of attention. Jennifer and I were up here a while back and scrounging around and found a bunch of date nails in these poles, and they were all 42s. So I'm assuming that's the last time that this structure was upgraded. And the reason it's here is it crosses the White River, which you can see there, and you can see why it is called the White River, and that's not a joke. It's called the White River because it's usually dry. As much rain and snow, well, snow down here, but as much rain as we've had down here and snow up in the mountains, I'm surprised there isn't a little water in this. It does get quite a bit of water in it occasionally, but go down here and hope I don't get killed by a flash flood. I'm talking about how there's never any water in it. But beautiful structure for people who appreciate that kind of stuff. It's still in pretty good shape. Doesn't have any trains running across it anymore, so it's not going to get worn out. You can see where the water's kind of starting to tear the lower structure apart. And that bridge over there is the old Highway 65 bridge. And Highway 65 is the road that goes to Porterville now. And the new road is a few hundred yards beyond. You see the cars going by it over there. Highway 65 did cross the tracks up by Ducor at one time. But the Highway 65, when it bypassed, went around the other way, stopped going, eliminated that crossing, sorry. And that bridge there that I'm parked along is the Famoso Porterville Road, and it connects those two towns. We have come to the community of Ducor, and you can see it's still a occupied place. Still a few people who live here, a few businesses. But looking down that way, there used to be a yard, a little switching yard, probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 tracks maybe. Then as it came here and crossed the road, there were 3 tracks. One there, and one there. And this warehouse here was served by the railroad. And before we move on, I would like to bring up the fact that Ducor, D-U-C-O-R, got its name because this was originally called Dutch Corners. Okay, we've moved up a little further at Ducor. There's that grain elevator, cool old facility, no longer in use. You can see where the tracks used to be over there that served it. And this is where the main line of the SP Eastside branch would have been. That was looking south, that's looking north. Went right on up there. And then this is about where the switch for the Minkler and Southern, which was a subsidiary of Santa Fe. This line was incorporated under the Minkler Southern, and it went out that way. And see the snow on the Sierra Mountains. But anyway, this is where the Santa Fe split off from the Southern Pacific, and between here and Oil Junction, the Santa Fe had trackage rights on the Southern Pacific. Okay, we have come into the community of Terra Bella, and we are standing actually right here is where the roadbed was. You can see where the tracks used to cross the street here. It's all been torn out, and that is now the entrance to Porterville Citrus Incorporated. It's a citrus packing and shipping facility. And going this way is the Growers Citrus Packing. No remnants of the tracks through Terra Bella, really. Right over there, I don't recall if it is that building or if the building that used to sit next to it was the depot, the Terra Bella depot at one time. One thing about the Terra Bella depot is that it was not built by the railroad, by Southern Pacific. It was built by the city of Terra Bella in hopes of enticing the railroad to create a stop here, which they eventually did. All right, here we are on the Deer Creek Bridge, and that is Deer Creek, looking east toward the mountains. I love this bridge. It's really a good looking structure. It's starting to fall apart. I did a pictorial history on my Facebook of this line quite a few years ago, and the bridge was in much better shape then, but it is getting old, hasn't been cared for in a long time, and it is falling into disrepair. And before I got out of here, I did want to get a picture from alongside the bridge. It's very picturesque, cool place to come take pictures, portraits and stuff like that. So if that's your thing, you know a place you can come, about a mile north of Terra Bella. Okay, we are at the outskirts of Porterville. And as I said at the beginning of this, Porterville is the only city that was already laid out prior to the arrival of the railroad along this line. And we were just looking south towards Bakersfield. Let's go north up towards Porterville. The reason I want to stop here is the road makes a little jig jog here. See that truck's going around and cross the tracks when they used to be here. And when it was still Southern Pacific, we had this line. This is one of the only places I came up and worked. We used to have knockdowns at the crossings here all the time because the drunk drivers would miss that curve right there and hit the gate over here or vice versa. Missed that curve and hit the gate over there. It was so common, it was ridiculous. But anyway, head on into Porterville proper. Okay, we have arrived in Porterville. We are at Olive Avenue. See where the tracks used to cross here. Right there where that building stands is where the original Southern Pacific Depot was. The railroad arrived here in 1888, and as I said, Porterville was the only town along this line that wasn't built by the railroad. And the town was named for a man named Royal Putnam Porter, who was an agent for the Butterfield stages that had a stop here, and he built a hotel and got this place going. But anyway, there was a small yard here in Porterville, and it set beyond and behind the depot. You can see where it curves off to the left there, and there was a water tank, I don't know what size it was, and a turntable, a switching yard. Nothing elaborate, just enough to get trains turned around and anything they might need to do there. Don't know if there were engine shops there. Don't think there were, because there were some up at Exeter, will be shortly. That became known as the Olive Street Station. After they built the passenger depot, which is right down there, which is where we'll go next. Okay, we have moved a little further up into Porterville to what was the passenger depot. And it's a Spanish style architecture, beautiful building. It's a museum now. Oddly enough, it has virtually nothing in it pertaining to the railroad. I was kind of surprised by that. It actually doesn't have a lot of historical stuff in it at all. It's kind of jumbled up, or at least it was when Jennifer and I went there a few years ago. But it's still a beautiful building, and we are standing, well, this fence would be about where the main line was, and then the house tracks would have been over there where the parking lot is. Okay, we've moved a little further north. At Porterville, you can see the roadbed curving away that way to the right. You can see where the tracks used to cross the road there. The reason I wanted to stop here was a couple of reasons. One of them is that cement foundation right there is where one of the automatic block signals stood. In 1984, when I came back to work in January after being laid off, this is the first place we worked. That signal was still in service at the time. But this is Henderson Avenue, and Jennifer thought that I needed to add some personal touch and personal life to some of the things I shoot around here. And when I came back from being laid off in '84, the first job I did was at this crossing. There were just flashers here at the time. We put in gates and cantilevers, and we were over there in that flat spot. We built the cantilever there, and we needed to move it up to here. We built the cantilever laying on the ground, and when we picked it up, I had the hand line wrapped around my wrist, and the guy who was running the boom wasn't very good at it, and when he started lifting the cantilever up, the slack came into the cable as it went over the top because he hadn't winched in enough, and it fell over and started pulling me and the cantilever out into the street over there. And it was, like I said, it was wrapped around my wrist, so I didn't want to just try to let go of it, so I wrestled the cantilever and actually got it stopped before it came out in the street. We didn't have any signs up or anything. It was a very busy street, and so my foreman appreciated the fact that I didn't let the cantilever slide out into the road and possibly injure somebody, that I didn't get injured, and it was the last time that that guy, I'm going to mention his name, ever ran the boom while I was on the Tulare gang anyway. But anyway, a little story behind the crossing at Henderson Avenue and all that work we did and all that stuff, and today there is absolutely not one remnant of any kind of all the work we did here in January of 1984. I said when we were down in Porterville that we'd be stopping at Strathmore, where the track started again. Well, that's Strathmore. We're about a mile north of it, and when I did my pictorial history of this line, I believe I did that in 2010 or 11. The tracks ended at Avenue 196 in downtown Strathmore, and they are pulled up to right here now. This is Avenue 204, and that is looking north toward Fresno. So we will head on up there, see what's next. Okay, we have moved up to Lindsay. Lindsay is still a thriving little town. It's a jumping little place. They got a really cool little downtown mall thing down there. We stopped and checked some of that out. Lots of shipping and packing, citrus and fruit, nuts and all that still going on here. However, it looks like these tracks haven't been run in a while. They are all rusted on the top. This flasher right here, that was pointing down. That one's gone. Guess somebody decided they needed it more than the railroad. That one's pointed off toward that building. And speaking of that building, they got a cool little mural there going around the corner. Got the train there, and that is looking north toward Fresno. And this little park right here has a building. I don't know if that's new. It does kind of look new, but it certainly fits the style of some of the old Spanish style depots that were built, but that's just a small square building. I don't know. I'm sure there was a depot in Lindsay at one time. This is obviously where it was, because that is a loading platform. And I'm sure this is probably where the depot was. And that's a neat little building. Don't know what its purpose is or was, or if it's new or old. If anyone does know the disposition of the depot in Lindsay, leave in the comments below. I'd be interested to know. All right, moving on. Okay, we're still in Lindsay here. That's looking south, north. And this is the Porterville Citrus Orange Packing Facility. You see the crates of oranges going through there. A lot of them, but the reason I wanted to stop here, I noticed this whole wigwag. Looks like somebody's tried to pull it over and didn't succeed. But this crossing's out of service. The track's obviously abandoned here. There's the case. It doesn't have a meter on the AC service anymore. Nothing interesting in that case. I know that all the cool relays and stuff were taken out of these years ago. They're just plain old relays, if there are any in there at all anymore. But anyway, I just wanted to showcase that wigwag. I was hoping the crossing would still be in service. I would have put my jumper cables down and you guys could have seen it work. But anyway, moving on. All right, we have come up to Exeter, and this is Fireball Avenue here, this crossing. Exeter is a cool little town. It's pretty clean, right up against foothills here, and got some cool antique shops and restaurants and stuff like that, stuff little towns generally have. Got some cars stored out there, so obviously this track is still being used and that crossing is still in service. Exeter is another town that was laid out by the railroad after the coming of the line. And from what I can gather, it was named for a British political division. Whatever the heck that means, I guess the Exeter Party, hell if I know. But anyway, this big old building here was they made corrugated steel culverts and stuff like that. There's a spur going back that way. So I'm sure that at some point the railroad served it. I came up here in the 80s and did some work in this place. I don't remember it being open even then. It's been closed ever since I can remember. Maybe I got my 80s and my 90s mixed up, but the place has been closed for a long time. Looks like it'd be a cool place to do some abandoned exploration. Might have to see if I can find a hole in the fence sometime, another time. But anyway, that is looking north toward Fresno, and we will head up that way. Okay, we have moved up into the downtown area of Exeter. There's downtown. We're a little west of downtown, I guess you would actually say. There's the big Exeter water tower over there. That's right in the middle of town. There's the fire station. But anyway, that is looking south where we were a few minutes ago. And this is looking north. And to the right there, that big building, you see where those locomotives and cars are parked. That is the Exeter headquarters of the San Joaquin Valley Railroad. And that is, as I said, looking north. And up there, where you see those cars to the left, the road splits there. The one that curves off to the right is the Eastside branch that goes to Fresno, where the cars are stored out there. The track turns to the left out there, and that is the old Visalia Electric branch that goes into Farmersville and Visalia. And the Visalia Electric will be a whole other piece that I do at some point in the future, but I will. The crossing we just visited, where I showed the tracks going through Exeter and up to the engine shop, which is that building right there. That is, it is the repair facility. Those cars and engines are parked behind those bushes and trees right there. But I was mistaken about it being the headquarters and the major repair facility. That is right here. This is, as you can see, San Joaquin Valley Railroad. We're not a class 1 railroad, we're a first class railroad. Well, that may be true. They seem to run a pretty tight ship over there, and they were able to make a fortune off these branch lines when Santa Fe and Southern Pacific were going bankrupt on them. But anyway, there is a spur track that goes on that side of the facility, and they have a couple of locomotives parked over there. It used to go across the street and join the East Side branch over there. It no longer crosses the street, but this here does. They got a locomotive parked there. You can see, but that track right there crosses the road, and it goes over and ties into the main line and goes up to the where those cars are stored, where I showed you a minute ago. Going this way east, that branch there and there turn in, they're kind of a Y, but that turns into a branch line that goes out into the foothills there and serves quite a few industries. There's quite a few spurs that branch off of that. All right, we are in the small community of Ivanhoe. A little industry there. Looks like some sort of a compost place. It's got its own little spur track. I don't remember ever having worked in Ivanhoe. As far as in this little town, there's a little crossing up there. But it's a really small community, little farming community, agriculture, got packing sheds. That's about all they have here is packing sheds, but does a brisk business. Just look at that, a wooden gate. I haven't seen one of those in service in probably 30 years. When I first started working in Tehachapi, they still had wooden gates at the Monolith Crossing. The wood pieces, these are made out of redwood, and they're numbered. So you put them together in a certain order. And they were a real pain in the butt, and they were impossible to do alone. I never had to rebuild one. I helped to maintain a rebuild one time, and then shortly after that they swapped those gates at Monolith out with fiberglass gates, or metal gates, aluminum, whatever they were, I don't remember, but they got rid of the wood. But anyway, it was kind of interesting to see an old wooden gate still in service here in Ivanhoe. So I wanted to stop here real quick. This is looking back into Ivanhoe, where we were just a second ago. This is the intersection of Avenue 332 and Road 156. And I just thought it was an interesting crossing because it goes diagonally through the middle of the intersection. Road 332, or Avenue 332, runs that way, and then Road 156 runs that way, which is north and south. I assumed that the packing sheds up in Ivanhoe, they were served by the railroad, but they're not. There are no spurs, there are no loading tracks or anything, just that little compost business. All right, we have come up to Dinuba, about 20 miles from Ivanhoe. Dinuba still has some side tracks down there that serve these businesses and are used for storage. You can see the cars in them down there on the left. Actually did not a lot of work in Dinuba, but this crossing right here, we came up here in 1984 and did a bunch of work to this crossing and the adjacent crossing down there. And they look nothing like they did back then. This was it was a 4-lane road, but it didn't have an island and it didn't have 4 gates, and neither did the one down there. They were still just relatively small crossings. We put up some new gate mechs and stuff at both of these crossings, and looks completely different today. Well, in the segment where I show the Kings River Bridge, you'll hear me say that I didn't go to Reedley, but this is some time later, and I ended up coming here because I was up here anyway. And this is looking through Reedley, and this is kind of why I wasn't going to stop here originally. So there's not much here, just some tracks that go through town, no interesting crossings. There used to be, seems to me there was a wigwag at one of these crossings, but it doesn't look like it's there anymore. And the last time I was here, there was still an abandoned packing shed here. Now it is the Kings Canyon Unified School District building. All right, not much in Reedley, and their museum's closed. All right, this is the Kings River Bridge in Reedley. I didn't stop in the town of Reedley. We're just right on the edge of town here. The river actually runs on this side of Reedley. There's some cool parks and stuff over there, but as far as the railroad goes, just some straight track running through a bunch of adjacent crossings. And I just always thought this was really a cool looking bridge. I wish I could catch a train across it maybe someday, but I talked to one of the hands in Exeter, and he said that they weren't going to be having anything going on today. Okay, we have moved to the next town up the line. This is Sanger, and we are at 7th Street. And right there is where the Sanger Depot once stood, and that building was moved away from the tracks and into town in 1975, and we'll go take a look at that in a minute. It's a museum now. Don't know if it's open. We'll see. But anyway, got some cars spotted here. The old house track or siding or whatever, got some there as well. Cool looking old packing shed, long abandoned. And if you look up there, you'll see where the tracks start curving away towards Fresno. All right, well, here's the Sanger Depot Museum, and it is on Henderson Avenue. If you're ever up here, close to Main Street, whatever that street's called. This museum is only open one day a month, from 9 to 3 on the first Saturday of each month. I've been here before. It's a really cool little museum. I wish it was open. The typical standard Southern Pacific sign that they had at the ends of the depots gave you the mileage to, on this particular line, to San Francisco and New Orleans. Since, as I said at the beginning, this is actually a B main, it did have those miles on it. Since it wasn't a dead-end branch line, it did go from point to point and tie into the main line at each end. So it got one of these signs. 220 8/10 miles to San Francisco and 2,284 4/10 miles in New Orleans. All All right, well, this is the interlocking of the Eastside branch that San Joaquin Valley Railroad uses, and the BNSF main line. We're going to get to catch a SJVR locomotive set going through here. That's pretty cool. This was once called Sunmade Tower. It's still a control point. I don't know what it's called for BNSF. I don't know if it's called Sunmade or what, but yeah, Sunmade Crossing. All right, and this is at the intersection of East Avenue and California. Cool. All right, this is where the Eastside branch comes back on to the Union Pacific main line in Fresno, just west or north of Ventura Street, which is the crossing up there. This is all new. This entire control point is new. This was not even, I had heard nothing about this while I was working. The old main line is over there, and there's a switch right over there where the which is where the line used to, where the East Side branch used to come back. That's all abandoned now. So anyway, that is where we are. This would have been the Kern Street crossover, which was right over there. All right, well, I hope you all enjoyed that. It took me a long time to do this video. I started it back in 2019, and I got sick in 2020, a week after I shot my last piece in Dinuba. So I'm gonna get on ahead and get on out of here and start a new project for all of you. All right, keep shooting me the ideas, drop in the comments below. Shoot me an email at motorport59@gmail.com. Like, share, subscribe, click on the bell if you want to be notified of future content. We'll see you all later.